Ok, benvenuti ragazzi in questo nuovo episodio di Performance Talks. In questa giornata oggi abbiamo il piacere di avere Christian Bosse. Sorry sir if I pronounce it wrongly, so if it's that wrong, you have to correct me. Quindi iniziamo. My first question would be if you could introduce yourself a little bit for our listeners.
Yeah, welcome. My name is Christian. I'm originally from Germany, which is probably easy to hear from my accent. I studied sports science in Germany, and then I moved on to become a strength and conditioning coach. I've worked in different countries for different international and national organizations. I started my strength and conditioning journey in India some 20 years ago. Then I moved to Spain, worked for the Spanish Federation, then for the British Tennis Federation. Then I went to China for some time to work for the Chinese Olympic Committee. And for the last almost 12 years, I'm here in the Netherlands working for the Olympic Committee with Olympic athletes.
Well, that's pretty cool story. May I say that the first time I come across to your work was through your Instagram page and then your blog. And then I was quite fascinated about this, I don't know how to say it, but this long travel, and it got you like back in Europe, basically. So you got a good career. I mean, you also.
I definitely like Southern Europe, and hopefully I get a chance to work in Italy at some point. I've kind of fallen in love with Sardinia a few years ago.
Okay, gotcha. Well, actually, I'm from the north part of it, so the weather today looks like a little bit more, closer to Germany, I guess. But yeah, Sardinia is way better than where I'm here right now. But as I said, you also participated to the last Olympic Games. Is it correct?
Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, about like your what you do in Netherlands, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, I started here in the beginning of 2010, working with our Olympic programs and also some of our, we call it talent programs here. It's basically the development programs, the junior national teams. I started out with BMX Supercross, volleyball and beach volleyball. That has changed a bit over the years, and since 2012, I'm mainly responsible for track cycling and BMX Supercross. So I was fortunate to have athletes participating in 3 Olympic Games. So that's a pretty cool experience, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is a great experience, I guess. Talking about a little bit about a topic that usually we have never covered before, which is cycling. If we can go across your social media and your blog, it's possible to see that you use a lot of different exercise selections. So my next question would be about in regards of technical proficiency and what does that mean, and especially what does that mean for you, for your athletes, and etc.
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind for me is strength and conditioning is not an end, it's a means to an end. So the first question is, why do we do strength and conditioning in the first place, or why do we do certain strength training movements in the first place? So we want to have a carryover to the sporting performance. So therefore, we need to analyze the demands of the sport. We can do a movement analysis, we can do metabolic analysis and all these kind of things. And from that, I personally have derived certain exercises that I believe are very valuable for that sport and that athlete. And then the next thing is, how do we elicit adaptations with these exercises? And then we have, depending on what adaptation we are chasing, we have different training variables that we need to push. So that could either be intensity or loading, external loading. That could also be maybe the velocity of movement. That could be whatsoever. Again, it starts more or less with the end in mind. What do I want to achieve? And then find the right exercises and training methods to do that.
Exactly. So this kind of approach is like the base of strength and conditioning. And most of the time, strength and conditioning coaches tend to be too much obsessed with some exercise and rather than the other. We got a little discussion before recording the podcast about selection of exercises. So going in depth. So once you select one specific exercise or whatever movement you think that could achieve your goal, ultimate goal. So I mean, my question would be, what's the process you're going through for selecting exercise? Let's say, for example, strength, or let's say power. I'll ask this question because I see that even if we're working with a lot of cyclists, and maybe for like the common people, think about a cyclist, you don't think about athlete, they do power cleans and you know, Olympic derivatives, but you do a lot of them. So if you could explain a little bit your selection and why you select those kind of exercise, for example, the power clean, I guess.
Yeah. Coming back to the original point, I'm also quite a fan of a few exercises. So for most of my programs, I have an Olympic lift or derivative in there. I have a bilateral squat variation, preferably back squat and front squat. But not everyone can do it for various reasons. I would say the majority of my athletes do these exercises, but again, it's more like this idea of you can't, how do you say that? Can't put a round peg into a square hole or something like this, or other way around. So therefore, what you outlined, the technical proficiency is very important. So we start early learning the techniques of certain lifts. If after some time we see it's not going to work, then we look for alternatives. Some time is, in my world, probably a year or more, not necessarily weeks. So we definitely spend a lot of time working on technical proficiency in order to be able to load these exercises later. The next question you had was why exercises? Yeah, so the Olympic lifts, for example, is a unique combination of applying force and velocity to the bar. So force multiplied by velocity is power. Power is the name of the game in most sports. So that makes it I don't want to say perfect exercise, but it makes it a very valuable exercise if you can execute it correctly. What was the next question you had?
No, basically, it's just that if you could go a little bit deeper in regards of, let's say, the things you just told me about the fact that you tried to develop these skills, let's say the skills, for example, the Olympic lift for 1 year. So you didn't pretend the athlete have, 12 weeks to learn such high skill movement. And after that, if you come to the conclusion that might not be the right solution, what kind of exercise do you select for in exchange of it?
Yeah. Answering the first question, yeah, we take 1 year because we are in a fortunate position where we have athletes coming in at a fairly early age, so we have time to develop technical proficiency. If I would have only 12 weeks, as you outlined, I would probably do more of a hybrid approach. So teach and learn the techniques as part of the training, and then look for alternative exercises to do the loading or whatever training goal I'm chasing. And then the third question was, sorry,
yeah, the exercise selection importance in the sense of like, as you said, like Olympic lift, of course, got like this high level of skill, so they are quite more difficult, let's say, to learn. But once you've learned, you can actually produce the force that you more likely will use in the sport performance, because that's exactly power, as you mentioned. So, and as you said, power, I guess, is, I don't want to say it's the king of performance, but could be. And therefore, the exercise selection comes to that regards. I see, as you said before, you do a lot of front squats and back squats, developing pure strength. Do you have what's your opinion about those kind of exercises and how you implement in your training routines for your athletes?
Yeah, I mean, the front squats and back squats are not only a lower body exercise, it's a full body exercise, right? So obviously the lower body is the main mover in that exercise, but it also has a high activation on the trunk and to a certain extent also on the upper body. So, and that is that has a fairly good transfer to many sports. So that's probably why I like to use the squat movement. You also see squat movements or variation of squat movements in many sporting actions, as simple as a jump. It's a shorter squatting movement. So therefore, the squat is definitely one form of the squat is definitely part of my training program if it has transferred to the sport.
Okay, gotcha. One question that I would like to ask is in regards of, let's say, once you go a little bit closer to the competition, do you change exercise selection or do you change maybe the angle of it?
The way I do it is actually I look at, let's say, the overarching category. So that could be a squat, right? And then depending on what training phase we are in, then it is a variation of the squat. So what could that mean? Let's make it simple. Obviously, if we're working on max strength, a full back squat is something we could do. If we are more working on, let's say, hypertrophy, functional hypertrophy, we could do a back squat with 1.5 repetitions. If we are working more closer towards competition, we could shorten the range, do a quarter squat and add more load. If we are more focused on power development, ballistic power development, that could be a jump squat with load, or if we are working more towards the dynamic strength development, so that could be then a box squat with bands or just a squat with bands from a rack or something like this. So the exercise changes, but the category of the exercise is pretty much the same.
That's also.
And then we have the same for the Olympic lifts or stuff like that, right? So if we go through the continuum of exercises, then the exercise variation is dependent also a little bit on the more or less on the training goal.
Okay, and I think that it could be a little bit even easier for the athlete to understand the training goal and understand the training program, because they just have to follow along. Also, because if they are proficient to, let's say, a squat, and then it's just variation of it, you also feel like confident once you have to do it, I guess. So that make even athlete more resilient in the sense of like not physically, but also like mentally resilient. And I guess that's also a skill at the end of the day, because the squat itself will not win trophies or whatever. So, I guess that strength conditioning game, maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, you have to correct me. But it's also to develop like nowadays they talk about like robustness of athletes, and they're just in regards of like the physical qualities. But I guess that strength conditioning, at least in my opinion, have a little bit of magic in regards of the developing robustness of the mental, in the sense of like how much they want to achieve the specific goal, and how much they want to pursue it. But
yeah, and it also works the other way around. What I've noticed over the years, because with some of the athletes I'm working for a fairly long time, and they started out with me, so they have never touched a weight before coming to me, and then have gone through a transition, let's say. They are really somewhat fixed on the exercises that have brought them the success, right? So then it's also like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that exercise. So it also works that way.
Yeah, exactly. Also because like as I said, it develops a sense of like awareness of themselves. So I'm competing well because I don't want to say because I'm doing back squat, for example, but in part of my development I got back squats, and then that becomes a little bit even a mind tricking.
That's exactly what it is, what the connections some athletes do, right? They come up, if I can do 200 kilos full back squat for 3 reps, I know I'm in good shape. You could say, well, maybe not, but that's how it works for some athletes, huh?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that strength conditioning coaches have to be aware of the fact that maybe athletes want to pursue those numbers, but it's not necessary. It's like a fine balance to determine how much they actually need and how much they actually need for performance, and actually they much need for, let's say, you know, for from feeling themselves ready for the competition or whatever.
Yeah, and that also goes back a little bit. We do have these ratios of multiple times of body weight or 1.5, whatever it might be. But I use that with a bit of caution. I have it as a guideline, but it's not a fixed rule, because I also had athletes who were not able to do 1.5 times their body weight, and they have been Olympic finalists, and you know, like, they are good athletes in their sport. And so it's not that we have to chase these numbers. Some people can do it, some people can't. It doesn't mean just because you're not strong enough, you're not strong enough in the gym. It doesn't mean you're not a good athlete in your sport.
No, definitely. I've seen in my little experience as an SNC, as a practitioner, that even in rugby, you got, like, if you see like the international board, whatever, they got like big benchmark, but actually like in the lower league, it's not necessary that an athlete that is not achieving those numbers is not a good player. Most of the time, maybe it's the exact contrary. In the lower level, I mean, I'm just talking about the lower level. So going a little bit in depth about the fact that athletes come to you when they're young. So you have the chance to actually develop those athletes in the long run. So how is that process? How is that, you know, that process, and how you develop it?
That's
a big question. I know.
Yeah, that's a big question. So let me see if I can break it down. Well, they come to our training center, the Olympic Training Center, and they base themselves there. So they live there, they go to school somewhere in the vicinity, and they train every day. So the first step is me being responsible also for the national team. I look at what do I want to see in the national team, and then how does that trigger down to the junior national team. And then I just outline, okay, this is what I need to see after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And we just start simple, learning movements, learning how to move. And then once that is competent, once the athlete is competent doing that, then we start progressing in terms of complexity or loading in a certain exercise. And then we have a fairly seamless transition into what they do at the national team. What I just outlined in less than 1 minute is probably a process of 2 to 3 years.
Okay, yeah, definitely. It's like my question was a little bit too wide to get answer in like 2 phrases. So yeah, that's make completely sense.
It is like it's like this Leonardo da Vinci quote: "We are what we repeatedly do, therefore excellence is a habit, not an act." So it's like doing things every single day or 3 times a week over and over again, just perfecting the skill, and then at some point they will be proficient.
Yeah. So
no fancy stuff, it's just putting the work in.
Yeah, it's true though. So my next question is in regards of this topic. Sorry. So what's your opinion about this? You know, this social media era where it looks like is a challenge to find, you know, new tools and new things to catch the attention of the people, and I guess sometimes even SNC coaches tend to do it. Or let's say social media SNC coaches. So what's your opinion about like continuously changing exercises and you know, this feeling of find new tools that are like completely fancy in my eyes?
Yeah, I guess it comes back to one of the most fundamental training principles, the principle of variation or varied stimulus. My answer is always the same. I mean, it's not only exercises you can vary, right? I mean, obviously people think when talking about variation, it's varying exercises. No, there are many things you can vary. If you look at the main training variables, intensity, volume, whatever that might be, they can perfectly vary that. Yeah, finding new exercises and doing them. Well, it's definitely not part of my training philosophy, but I wouldn't say it's right or wrong. again, my thought process is you need to think of what you want to achieve and then find the right exercises for it. If you can do that through varying exercises, fine. But if your goal is varying exercises to keep it fun and entertaining, it's a different goal, huh?
Yeah, it's just you are trying to achieve your goal, not their goal. So that's the big
yeah. And what I alluded to, I mean, it's repeatedly doing what you're doing, and then at some point you are excellent. And it sounds a bit, it might discredit the sport a little bit, or might discredit strength and conditioning, but in some form it's manual labor, right? You go, you do the work, you go back, you do the work, you do the work, you do the work. There is a certain aspect of monotony to sport, and I guess every athlete will realize that the higher you get up the level of professionalism, there will be monotony, and there will be days you don't feel like training. So yeah, I have a good example for you. Just let me drop a name here. Harry Lavreisen, one of my athletes. He just collected his world championship title #9 a few weeks ago after a heavy week of competition, and won every event he entered. So 5 days of heavy competitions, collects his 9th world championship title on a Sunday, and he's back in the gym on a Tuesday. And it's not like I tell him to be in the gym. He said, like, I want to train on Tuesday. Are you there? So yeah, I guess that's an example for someone who's an overachiever, who knows what it takes and who understands that that is what he needs to do in order to dominate his sport.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a good relationship that you develop even with your athletes, because they want to train with you because you got like they feel like you are needed in that position, in the spot. So is a
Hopefully.
yeah. So moving on to my next question will be in regards of cyclists, and could you tell us a little bit about first of all how a cyclist should look like, or not look like in an aesthetic way, but in the performance way. So what's their main training goals in that sense? And also, how do you develop those goals? How do you develop those skills? And if they have the chance, if they are talented enough, even to go to Olympics, for example.
You always are having these broad questions, huh? So, okay, let me start. When I started out here in the Netherlands, I really had no idea of cycling. I mean, I just got thrown into the deep end and needed to figure out what I need to do. So step number one is you do your needs analysis. You understand what the sport is about and what the performance structure is about. You talk to the coach, get the idea of what the coach's opinion is about the sport, and you partly talk to athletes as well. So that way is how I started to get an understanding of the sport. And then once you have this information, you see how can you support that best with your training, with your strength and conditioning, because no athlete will come to you and say, we need exercise A, B, and C. They say, if I'm fastest starter, I'm very likely to win the race, right? BMX, that's most often the case. If you are the best starter, or you are in the first turn as number one, you are most likely to win. So this is probably what they say. I need to start faster, could be something. And then I have to go back and see, okay, what does it take to start fast, and how can we train it? And then, yeah, you come up with certain training methods that most often in this example would be probably some maximum strength training, some power development, some plyometrics. So that's how I develop it.
And going a little bit in depth with it, so once you determine the needs of the sport, and you talk to the athletes, the coaches, and you develop this program, and you have basically to deliver it. So what is your experience in the first place? Like how the athletes accepted your NCC part? I don't know if they maybe have already a background in strength conditioning, or you just, I don't know.
That's a very good question. And I think I'm a little bit spoiled because I'm in a very fortunate position now that all the athletes that train with me, under me, who are successful, they have gone through that developmental cycle. So now for the junior athletes, it's much easier to accept, right? Because they know, again, Harry Lavrijsen, one of the guys, he has gone through that development cycle and he's where he is now. So everyone aspires to be like him. Or another guy from the BMX, Nick Kieman, also, he progressed through the ranks. And so now every junior athlete wants to be like him. So there's much more acceptance because he has gone through that development. It hasn't always been like that, by no means. And I have not always been successful in my own experience in convincing athletes and coaches of what the best way forward is. But that's also part of our profession. Sometimes you can convince people, sometimes you can't.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. Like in every profession, it's not always Sunday. So, you know, it's a hard part to make the athlete understand the reason why they need that specific work. But as you said, like nowadays, you're a young athlete, they look up to the older athlete at this point, and they see what everything they did for get at that point. So it's way easier to buy in them. So yeah, it makes completely sense. And about the fact of like, let's talk about like your top level athletes. So those that went to Olympic, for example, the guy that you mentioned before. So how do you structure this? I guess there's a change of the way you structure your work and the way you structure and deliver the S&C part for this kind of top level athlete. So there are big changes, or it's just basic stuff?
I wouldn't say there are big changes. I think there are subtle changes, and that changes over time. So the more advanced the athlete gets, there are more, again, subtle changes. But as I said before, right, I mean, the talent program, the junior national team, the idea of what we're doing with them is that hopefully at some point they get to the national team. So therefore the work is very similar. I mean, it wouldn't make sense if we do a certain type of work with our national team athletes and then a different type of work with our developmental athletes. I have an example. When we started out with our junior national team and tried to get also into the regional training centers, what people were doing in the regional training centers is, first thing, they buy a couple of Swiss balls and then people do stuff on the Swiss ball. That could be planks or balancing exercises or stuff like that. And then I try to make my point saying, listen, what we do in the junior national team and in the national team are these sorts of activities. So it would be much more helpful if we could do similar activities in the regional training centers. So that doesn't mean they have to clean and snatch and do stuff like this, but it would make sense if they stand on their both feet and do lunging movements, do squatting movements, do these sorts of activities. Because if you're just balancing on a Swiss ball, well, that doesn't help us very much if we are then later trying to develop movements where you're standing on one feet and, you know, moving explosively through different planes of motion.
Yes, and I guess that there was a battle of yours in the sense of like teaching them to and make them realize reason why is more needed to do a lunge or whatever, a squat, rather than just standing on the pole, and hoping that, you know, being able to stay on the ball will improve whatever. I don't know what.
Whatever it might improve, yeah.
Exactly.
There needs to be a purpose to training. I mean, if there's no purpose, then yeah, well, then it's exercising, it's working out. Nothing wrong with that. And I guess it has its place in training. But if you're chasing something like our athletes, they chase glory, right? So there needs to be a purpose to the training approach.
Yeah, definitely. And that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a fun part of it, but that fun part of it should be really dosage well. So let's say after competition, maybe you get a little break, so you have, you know, introduce something that could be a little bit more fun. But
Well, we do have fun. Huh? Sorry to interrupt you. We do
Uh,
have fun, right? I mean, it's like if I picture a typical session with the track cyclists, and you know, they do a heavy lift, they sit down, and then in the break we
yeah,
talk stuff, have a laugh, and then it's time to prepare for the next set and do the lift again. So it's yeah, it's the question: what is fun? Huh? If fun is just
yeah,
mucking around, no, that's not what we're doing. But you know, we try to combine hard work with also, you know,
yeah,
having some fun in
yeah,
what we talk in between the sets.
yeah, definitely. So, moving on, my last question is going back a little bit, and it will be about strength exercise proficiency. And you actually already covered a little bit about what you believe in the proficiency of strength exercises, if it's crucial for young athlete, and how much, let's say, for a guy like 18 years old, which is stepping in the, I guess, in the elite level, what's their number could be, and if they don't, do you allow them to take a little step back and develop those skills as strength and power, or what's your approach with it?
I'm not sure whether I understand the question very well.
Basically, I'm just asking the fact that those numbers, let's say you have to do, I don't know, twice body weight squats. Do you have numbers even in the younger population, younger athletes, or you just go with like a little bit more broad approach?
Yeah, what I've outlined before is I do have these numbers, but I'm not too strict on it. I think they are flexible, and I think they are guidelines. They are not written in stone. What I've noticed is over the years when we work with our younger athletes, and again, they are younger than 18, so they are 14, 15 when they start out. And we spend a lot of time, again, working on technical proficiency, consolidating movements like a squat, like a hinge, like a jump, a land, a push, a pull, whatever it might be, lunging in different directions. So, and if we do that and do it continuously for a year or 18 months, and then we start loading, is that the numbers, you'll get to the numbers automatically, just because they are technically proficient in these movements. So, but this is when you start out with 14, 15. What do you do if you are 18? I have most often made not good experiences when you try to fast track a process. So I would still look at technical proficiency or develop technical proficiency as much as possible before I look at loading or overloading certain patterns.
Okay, gotcha. So basically, you prefer, or like, let's say, tend to prefer technical proficiency rather than actually the numbers that might could be been seen in some videos about US in America. You see they're chasing those, may I be honest, like really bad power clean for really bad.
But that goes back to what I said in the beginning. Why do we do a power clean? So is it just because we want to get a weight from the ground onto our shoulders? Doesn't really matter how, or why do we do a power clean? And then my point is, maybe we are working on a triple extension, maybe we are working on the triple flexion. So if we do a suboptimal power clean where there's no triple extension, no triple flexion, as just two benefits we get from that movement, what's the point of doing a power clean? So of course, you can move maybe 140 kilos from A to B, but if that is done with a suboptimal kinetic chain, then, well, what's the transfer to your sport?
Yeah, definitely. No, I completely agree with you. It's just the purpose of the exercise is important, and then it's not necessary to get caught up in just doing the exercise because they are doing it. So yeah, I completely agree with you. Sir, I don't have any more questions. I would like to say thank you very much. I know that my question were a little bit too broad, too wide to get a specific answer, so I may say sorry. But as I said, like, thank you very much for your time. It's been a huge pleasure. I will always look up for your article, and especially in your blog, because I found them really, really instructive. And also they are written in a simple way, even for me as an Italian to understand completely the concept and the process thinking they should develop with it. So as I said, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, if you have any more things to say for our listeners, go on.
Well, number one, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity of talking to you and to your listeners. Yeah, you might have guessed I do like quotes. So talking about simplicity, also, I really like the idea of simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. So, and that has guided my thought process and also how I do training and probably how I write my articles to, yeah, try to simplify things. I think we are living in a world where people want to do complexify, and also especially in the strength and conditioning world, you need to make it, there is a trend that you want to make your name by making things complex and talking about things people don't understand. But I guess my passion is more educating people and saying, listen, things are fairly simple. Focus on a few core principles, do them well. And that's what we do with our athletes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, sir. I completely agree with you. You couldn't say nothing better than that.